a lot of the kibbutz, the early kibbutz, they were socialists. Yes, but who was actually giving cover for the kibbutz? It was the terrorists, Ergun, Haganah, Stern gangs, like these.
About Palestine. Some of you may know a lot. So I've tried to be mindful of this in the writing of my speech. Just over a year ago, Al Jazeera journalist and Christian Palestinian Shireen Abu Akleh was murdered in cold blood for exposing the daily war crimes that so-called Israel carries out against Palestinians as part of its ongoing genocidal settler colonial project. Shireen's martyrdom has helped to further expose to the world what so-called Israel really is. But Shireen is just one of many. Since 2000, the Zionist entity, or so-called Israel, which I will call it, has murdered at least 55 journalists, to say nothing of the tens of thousands of Palestinian men, women, and children who have succumbed at the hands of Zionists since the first Intifada, or Palestinian uprising, in 1987. It's all too easy to tune out, I get it. But understand that this is precisely what those in power want. In fact, we are intentionally bombarded literally 24/7 with both real and manufactured crises. In the case of Palestine, what is it you hear? Often our people are called terrorists for resisting their illegal occupation, and the occupying entity, we're told, has a right to defend itself. If a child is kidnapped and held captive against their will and tries to escape their captor by any means necessary, does the captor have a right to defend themselves? At best, the issue is infantilized, reduced to the idea of two kids who simply like to fight and can't be controlled. This framing encourages you to tune out because it intentionally muddies the waters, a duplicitous tactic used by the media and by Zionists in general to diffuse solidarity among well-meaning but misinformed allies. But even muddy water does not entirely obscure the images in its reflection. And the ugly face of so-called Israel becomes ever clearer with each passing day. And this is their greatest fear. It is the greatest fear of any abuser, in fact, to be exposed for what they really are. And this is why any person or group dedicated to Palestinian liberation is frequently targeted by Zionists and their institutions because of the Zionist fear of exposure. Of people around the world finding out what Zionism is really about.
Welcome, my friends, my family. Welcome. A lot of great guests is on, and we're going to talk about Israel-Palestine, something that we bring up all the time on this show. It is, to me, the litmus test. Like, if you get this issue wrong, especially as a Black American, because there's been a long-standing history of solidarity between African Americans, South Africans and their apartheid, and Palestinians. So when I see people get this issue wrong, I see the same person get the issue wrong of anti-Blackness. Like, it's a giant blind spot to have. And many people don't know what Zionism is. People don't see the face of Zionism. And that's what we try to show all the time. And this is from Palestinian Community Network. We had Nkosi Mandela on our show. Big shout out to Ashley. You heard Ashley here. She's from Madison for Palestine, also with Palestinian Community Network. That was her speaking. And I want to give a big shout out to Ashley for helping me throw this together. She's the same person to help us get Nkosi Mandela on our show. She's a very powerful advocate for Palestinian rights. So as our guest, Feras Halal from the Palestinian Community Network, who is an activist and an artist as well. Thank you for joining us, Feras. It's an honor to be in constant dialogue and communication with the Palestinian Community Network. Welcome to the RBN Activist Summit.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you for this invitation. I appreciate you.
So the video that we played earlier was actually speaking on the issue of Israel-Palestine. So for the people who are not familiar with your organization and why this issue is so important, I want to use that as a way to introduce you to the audience. So I want you to explain what the Palestinian Community Network is all about, your activism, and you can also sprinkle why this issue is so important. So it's a good introduction to our audience if you want to take that on for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So the Palestinian Community, USPCN, Palestinian Community Network in the U.S. is an intergenerational grassroots movement. We're transnational, so we operate in North America. And we're basically working, we're not in solidarity with the Palestinian movement. We're actually part of the Palestinian liberation movement. So we're working towards Palestinian liberation, which I believe, in my opinion, also is liberation for all. So we know that our Nakba, which is not an event, it's an ongoing process that began. The Nakba is an Arabic word for catastrophe. This refers to the ongoing ethnic cleansing, genocidal campaign that the Zionist entity commits on a daily basis against Palestinians, and this refers to our dispossession. This has been going on for more than 75 years. It actually began, with the British occupation of Palestine, which then laid the groundwork for a Zionist entity to actually appear and to, manufacture this false state that does not have any right to exist. Whereas our right to defend ourselves and our right to protect ourselves is a given, and it is time for the Nakba to end and not to exist anymore, and is contingent upon our partners in the U.S., people that claim to be fighting for liberation out here in the U.S., whether it's DSA, other groups, all of these groups, our values are pretty much aligned, and you cannot fight for liberation of. I mean, just look at the geographic location of Palestine, right? It literally connects Asia and Africa together, and the entity has been installed, as a thorn in the spine of any kind of non-alignment movement, any kind of liberation movement that works towards all of the wretched of the earth. Obviously, I have more to speak on that and to share, but I'll start us off there. And let you all.
Yeah, I wanna because you said a very few powerful things I 100% agree with. You guys have the right to defense.
Yes.
You guys understand, according to the UN Charter, occupied people have the right to self-defense. So what the Zionists do, they always use underhanded, flat-out racist tactics where they say these people are terrorists for having the audacity of defending their home.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Feras.
No. I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, Nick, but absolutely, you're absolutely right. And just look at the origins. The other day I came across this news network. It's very powerful, and I think you would be very interested in learning more about it. The Cradle, it's called, and they, there was an operation that was done by the Haganah, which is like the Haganah, the Irgun. These are actual, terrorist groups. I know that word lost its meaning kind of because you basically throw it around against anybody who doesn't agree with you, who is resorting to some kind of armed struggle. But the Haganah and the Irgun, they did the explosion, the operation in King David Hotel in Jerusalem in 1946, and that was actually the first televised terrorist operation. These groups actually went on to form the IOF, the Israeli occupation forces. It's not defense forces, it's actually occupation forces, because they're occupying all of Palestine by power, and what Americans or people in the US and in the belly of the beast, fail to understand or seem to struggle to understand is what it means to live under occupation. That means that every aspect of your life is governed and controlled by an entity that will forever be foreign, that will never be integrated into the region, whether it's the Arab-speaking world, whether it's a Muslim world, but this kind of framing of when it comes to using certain chokehold words, right, like terrorism, anti-Semitism, all these serve is just to stifle and silence any kind of critique. So it becomes very important for people in the West to really expose Zionism for what it really is, and to study, what are Zionists actually talking about when nobody, with among themselves. Like if you listen to Israeli media, I mean, it's a place that is constantly going more and more and more to the right, and we're witnessing that moment. We're at a very critical moment for Palestinian liberation. With the judiciary system overhauled by Netanyahu, and the right wing is only becoming more and more emboldened, right? And what that means to Palestinians is that we're no longer even able to access our holy spaces, our public spaces. They want to assert control even over these, areas, because they pose a threat to the myth that Israel has
To
been
that
so
point, and to that point, to show you how bad the propaganda is on the West, you will see headlines about this all the time where they say, it will say Israeli soldier attacked at a mosque. I'm like, why would the Israeli soldier at the mosque? Why are they there? Like, so I want people to understand this happened all the time where Israeli soldiers, they will raid a mosque, holy places, committing the most cardinal sin of violating people in their sacred place. But God forbid a Palestinian throw a rock at those soldiers who does that. Now imagine how the evangelical radicalized Christian in America will react if you had outsiders, colonizers kicking in the door of their church. How would these Second Amendment gun-toting Americans react to an occupying force attacking their holy site? But they want to say that Palestinians are in the wrong? It's absolutely absurd. So I want to show this because this is, if I go through all my research of Palestinian, the Israel-Palestinian conflict,
Nick, I'm sorry. How they should react? It should be no reaction, because their actions and the things that they say. They say that they agree with these things. They don't give a fuck about the peace treaties that we have even broken in America. They still, survive and benefit off of this stolen land to this day. So if it was another occupying force that come and throw a coup or hold y'all hostage, you shouldn't do a damn thing because you agree with it. And what goes wrong will come back around. The chickens will come home to roost. We don't know when.
Absolutely.
We don't know when. But
that's what's happening right now. Like, they think like, even liberal Zionists are trying to give cover out here in the West with, image Israel, like all that liberal.
How will you define a liberal Zionist? Because we talk about this concept a lot on the show. So I want to hear from you. How will you define that?
I mean, they are the people that want that. First of all, they're interested in co-opting left language, like leftist language and leftist tactics.
You guys know who you talk about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They co-opt this language and they wrap up. Basically, what they do is like the same thing that the right does. They just wrap it up in a nicer packaging that is more palatable and acceptable, by today's in certain groups, in certain circles, basically, to gain legitimacy. But their goal is to give cover. I mean, there's a lot of like, oh, there's socialists, a lot of the kibbutz, the early kibbutz, they were socialists. Yes, but who was actually giving cover for the kibbutz? It was the terrorists, Ergun, Haganah, Stern gangs. Like these are, that is giving cover. And right now, the entity understands very well that the popular support for the entity is waning in the West, and that's why they have been turning east, with these normalization agreements, whether it's with the UAE, trying to get Saudi Arabia into the fold, but really Palestine is really every autocrat's nightmare, like now they're losing global support, so now they're heading towards autocratic nations, basically, to give it like a lifeline, basically, because that's what they know, that liberation is inevitable. Like our liberation is only inevitable. And I think everybody around the world has been inspired by Palestinian liberation. And when I say like, I mean Palestinians in the homeland, right? Like we're our role is to provide a cradle for them, to support them. But,
one of the ways you see this is, I don't know if you saw during the World Cup in Qatar, and
yes.
Carter always struggled to say that, but in the World Cup, there was a ton of Israeli journalists that was there,
yes,
and they was being hounded by everyone around the world.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw that. We did a segment a long time ago, which I can find a video. It was a while ago during the World Cup where it was a thing where Israeli reporters, Israeli people was asked this question by the international community: do you condemn Israel? Do you stand with Palestine? Do you support apartheid? Right. So there's a global movement. Lula, the leader of by far the largest country in Latin America, is a consistent ally of the Palestinian people. You have Xi Jinping. You have all these people that is outside the real axis of evil. I call it the axis of evil. The NATO establishment, the UK, Ukraine, and the United States. These are the countries, by the way, who vote against condemning Israel, by the way. Meanwhile, 80% of the global population is against Israel and the Zionist movement. And that's what is important to know. The world condemns this. We are in the heart of empire. We get constant Israeli apartheid propaganda, which RFK Jr. is helping propagate, who's running as president of Israel, apparently. Like RFK running as president of Israel. So he's part of that mechanism that produced this propaganda that most of the world sees through. So I'm glad you bring this up. And this is the do you want to chime in? Go ahead if you want to chime in.
No, please. I was just building on what you were saying. Like, of course, these nations, anti-imperialist nations, they understand very well that Israel is essentially a military base, right? Like, it's protecting U.S. imperialism, European white supremacy, like all of these interests. They're protecting them in the region, and so they understand that we have to eliminate this regime because it is truly a menace to the world. Like, who armed the massacre against and the genocide against the Rohingya? It's Ilbit systems, and they're Palestinian direct actionists, Palestine Action, that is people are putting their lives on the line to protect all of us around the world, and this goes back to policing here in the US. Like, where are the police forces trained? They're trained in Israel. Who is oppressed? Who's going to be oppressed by the police forces here in the US? It is going to be poor, Black, working class immigrants that are being attacked. And who is building the border, when it comes to like immigration, like Mexico, between Mexico and the US? It's the same, Cemex, the same company that built the apartheid wall in Palestine, the separation wall. So all of these dots are connected, and it really doesn't take, it's not complicated. It's actually pretty, because Palestinians have been so good at documenting our struggle. Like, and I'm talking from, back from the 18th century, 17th century, like we have a political awareness. We were aware that, this influx of European refugees that initially, were fleeing a crisis in Europe, and we accepted them. But then, people soon started seeing like, what is happening here? Like, there is something more than refugees. No, this is coming like with, police forces and with security forces, and no amount of weaponization or policing or surveillance is ever going to make the settler feel safe and secure. Because they know that they're on stolen land. They know that
That's such a good point. That's such a good point.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the same dynamic we see it here in the US, with the right wing, and same thing like with Palestine. Like when I was earlier referring to the Netanyahu government, what is happening essentially right now, and this is yet to hit the public consciousness, but Palestinian analysts are talking about it in Arabic, is that there is a shadow state that is forming, of the right-wing nationalists in occupied Palestine. And they, because Israel does not have a concept, like Israel, first of all, we have to understand that Israel is expansionist. Like even on the Irgun, the terrorist org that I mentioned earlier, on their emblem, like their main emblem, they have like, it's not just Palestine, it's also Jordan, like on the emblem. So they are interested, and this is also evidenced by, 48, when Sinai, the peninsula in Egypt, was occupied, when south of Lebanon was occupied. The Golan Heights, which belong to Syria, are still occupied. So their strategy is to expand beyond Palestine. They're not interested in just Palestine. They're interested in beyond, Palestine. And so we know from the beginning that their project has failed, because they're limited to Palestine. But there is a right wing that is being emboldened right now within the ranks of Zionists, the hardcore right wing. A lot of them happen to be very religious and messianic. They're aligned also with Christian Zionists here in the US, because they believe that everything that they're doing will bring, the Messiah to return. But so effectively, there is a governance, like the 67, what is called the West Bank, is effectively governed under Smotrich, which is, the Israeli minister, I believe, for finance. So there is no such thing as two-state. There is no such thing as peace process. Even the PA, what we call the Palestinian Authority, is actually the most anti-Palestinian. I really respect Black folks, when they say like, not all skin folk are kinfolk. We have the same dilemma when it comes to Palestinian liberation. Our leaders, Palestinian Authority, do not represent the aspirations of Palestinians for liberation. In fact, they are part of the Zionist entity, and they work.
That's a great point.
they do security coordination with the Zionist entity after Oslo, happened, which liquidated the Palestinian cause and Palestinian rights. So for Palestinians, there's a reason why Hamas wins elections. There's a reason, and it's because Hamas picks up armed resistance and moves with the people and does, work towards Palestinian aspirations of nationhood and self-determination.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's an issue that me and Rome deal with, Black Americans deal with the Black commission leadership class, because there are a lot of Zionists that will quote these Palestinians who sell their own people out, and they say, hey, they're for the two-state solution. Are you questioning those Palestinians? No, they're the field Negro for the Palestinian cause. The same way that we got the John Lewis, the same way we got the Hakeem Jeffries. There always will be the people who play gatekeeper and prevent real liberation, and they play on behalf of the establishment. And that's actually a concept that you guys explained last time you were on the show. And I was like, I actually never thought about it like that. So that's a very great point. And you mentioned how Israel is expansionist. And there's so many people who don't understand that this is pure settler colonialism. Yes. It's not a religious issue at all. They try to make it a religious issue, but it's not. Are you forced?
They co-opt.
Do you want to add to that, Feras?
Yeah, they co-opt and weaponize the Judaism religion. And I think that's why anti-Zionist Jewish people are so vocal, is exactly because they understand that, yes, anti-Semitism is very real, but actually Zionism, in my opinion, I consider Zionism actually to be anti-Semitism, because it directly weaponizes the Jewish religion, Jewish people, and it puts them in direct harm and direct danger with no care and no regard. And they're brainwashing their own people. Like, there is so much propaganda within the Zionist entity that it is very hard for people to, but they have to, they have to break free from that. And that is why Palestinian liberation, I believe, is for the liberation of all people, including Zionists, because as Paulo Freire said, the oppressor will never, has no tools to liberate himself, and they're trapped in this struggle, right? Like, they're trapped in this need for control and need to practice power over. But we, as the oppressed, we hold the keys for not only our liberation, but we are also capable of liberating the oppressor, right? And you are seeing this more and more clearly, and you see the same dynamics in the West, in the US, where white people are waiting for Black people to save them, and that's why they put a lot of pressure on Black people to vote in the elections. And same dynamic is replicated in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, where Zionists are waiting for Palestinians to save them, essentially, and want Palestinian turnout in every single election, and then blame us for not participating in a process that we know is actively, killing us. We're not even talking about the deaths, the assassinations. They're not deaths. They're assassinations that are happening in 1948 land, within Palestine, within, what we call Palestinians of the interior. Zionists call this Arab crime, Arab on Arab crime. Does that sound familiar? Yes. But it's actually, and the Shabak, the internal, the equivalent of the CIA in occupied Palestine, don't want to touch these crimes. They're not even investigating them. They don't do anything. And a lot of Palestinians have been saying that, well, it's because they are actually providing the weaponry for these Arab gangs to kill our own, and they're killing our most precious of youth, within 48. So, this map, I love that you put this map, because at the end you see it's almost like an island. Each town in Palestine is now an island, separated. So there is no, how do I say it? They tried really hard to divide and conquer, but what the uprising in 2021, the Unity Intifada of dignity, showed us is that we are capable of coming united, all working together, regardless of faction, regardless of where we are, even if we're in diaspora, even if we're in exile, even if we're, even if Gaza has a different experience than Ramla, has a different experience than Nablus, has a different experience than Al-Quds, Jerusalem, we're still united by these ideals, by principles that our elders and our ancestors have created for us, the thawabit, our principles, our constants, that we have the right of return, that all Palestinians will return back to our homeland. All of Palestine belongs to all of Palestinians. We are entitled fully to all of Palestine. We have a right to resist with any means necessary. Jerusalem, Al-Quds, is our capital of our future nation, and also Palestinian liberation is for Arab liberation, all of Arab liberation, because all of the countries that are surrounding Palestine, the leaders in those countries are not actually interested in Palestinian liberation because they know that, the revolution will be next at their doorstep next, right?
Yeah.
That's why I said earlier that Palestine, it's every autocrat's nightmare. And, when you said earlier, Nick, Palestine is a litmus test, well, Palestine is actually a lens. The same way that the Black liberation experience is a lens, you could use Palestine to understand power dynamics around you in the world. You could use Palestine to understand, this touches everything. Occupation touches every aspect of life, whether it's politics, economics, food sovereignty, our connection to the land, whether it's ecology in terms of like we're, like Palestinians are not even allowed to forage on our own land, Recently, I read that Zionists, the occupation forces have actually, poured cement in a water well.
Yeah.
In Al Khalil, in south of, in Hebron, so that's against the ecology too. Like everything, there's space for everybody to join the Palestinian resistance movement, and it touches every struggle in the world, and it unifies people, around the world, basically.
Yeah, Chuck Moody, I see you in the background. We're going to introduce you here very soon. This is the clip that you're referring to. You can find it just like that. Like, this is the result of the Israeli settler project. Israel began pouring cement on springs in the south of the city of Hebron to prevent Palestinians from using agriculture.
And
do you guys go ahead?
Nick, they did this as a tactic also in 48 when the Nakba first started, when they first started the catastrophe, an apocalypse. We survived an apocalypse, literally. They poisoned the water wells so that, as they kicked us out of our homes, our leaders, as they kicked them out of our homes, they also poisoned the water so you don't even have access to water in the heat of summer. It was in July,
I'm gonna show you guys.
I want to refer back to that picture of the Palestine.
Rome. I'm gonna pass it to you, Rome. On that thought, hold that thought. I'm gonna pass it to you just for a sake of time, because I want to show you guys this as well. Because not only is that map important. Oh wait, hold on, let me pull the right one up. I got a lot of shit. Oh, here it is. Israel is expansionist, and they're cruel beyond imagining. So not only is Israel seizing land, they demand that Palestinians bulldoze their own home.
Yes.
Like, it's absurdly brutal. The brutality is the point. But sorry, Ron, I didn't want to cut you off. I just want to show this here, because this is one of the ways they do it. They force people to bulldoze their own home so Israel can seize the land. Do you guys think this is a small issue now? Do you guys think it's a small disagreement now to get this issue wrong? It's absolutely not. And I hope in the last 30 minutes you guys see that. But Rome, I apologize for cutting you off, but I want to get your
I hate when people say, "Oh, well, no, that's just one disagreement." Like, no, see, this is the shit I don't like about Americans, is that we are so privileged that we sit here and talk about things that we will never face. We sit here and talk about sending bombs on countries that would never be dropped on us. Maybe not, more likely not. And we are so privileged that we can just write off people's lives like, oh, it's just some Palestinians. Who gives a fuck, right? We need a person who talk and look like us and office like we haven't had that for the last 200 fucking years. But anyways, I wanted to refer back to that picture of the foreign actors. You don't have to pull it up because I'm pretty sure you guys already know how it looked. But it's funny because it's literally showing you, in order for Palestinians to survive, it's either you're gonna have to push back, you're gonna have to expand, and what they have done was corner you guys in, and this is, I feel like this is the chance for everybody to expand and push out, and maybe, build some militias or somebody who's gonna be bossy enough to take back certain strongholds and certain lands that they have rebuilt for themselves and whatnot. Because it's gonna take you know, we can't sit here and softball everything when we're talking about people's lives. Like, if you're gonna fight, then fight back. You know, if they're trying to kill you, you should have a plan to stay here or take them out if needed be. So, you know, with that being said, you know, we're gonna have to really equip these people, educate people. And I ain't gonna say, you know, have them go in kamikaze, but you know, just remember that this fight is bigger than you. You know what I'm saying? It's bigger than your life. You know, the reason why we are alive right now is for the future generations. And you do not, you know, as a Palestinian, I'm pretty sure you do not want to leave your family in those conditions. You know, I don't want to leave my family in these conditions, even as a black man in America. You know,
100%.
so the
Now,
best change you can have is by being not as hostile, because I say it's self-defense. You know, at this point,